and then the vent will automatically open there based on the thermostat. What's up, Lazy Dog fam? Hope all y'all are having a fantastic day. It is Tuesday, November 19th here in South Georgia, and yesterday we finally got power hooked up to our new greenhouse here behind me. So in today's video I want to show you some of the features now that we have electricity in there. Going to talk about how we heated our small greenhouse in the past during the winter versus how we're going to be heating this bigger greenhouse this winter, and kind of give you an idea of the temperature ranges I'm looking to maintain in there. So let's start off by talking about what we did with the smaller greenhouse, which we're keeping. It's not going anywhere. Still going to use it for growing our own veggie transplants. You can see my shade cloth, it's gotten blown off by the wind a little bit. I could readjust that, but I'll probably just take it off for the winter months. So the main ways we regulate the temperature inside this little small 10x16 greenhouse are obviously through the shade cloth, which keeps it from getting too hot, and then these roll up sides here, which also help keep it from getting too hot. Then we can roll those down on really cold nights, keep it warmer in there. Now we do have power inside this little 10x16 greenhouse, which we use to run heat mats in the late winter months, early spring months when we're growing our own tomato and pepper transplants, for example. And we also use that power supply to run this little electric heater right here, which does pretty well as long as it's not getting too cold. But if it ever got in the 30s or colder than that, then we'd have to run this little propane heater right here and switch out those tanks every few days depending on how long the cold spell lasted. So we managed pretty well over the last 3 years in that little greenhouse using the electric heater and the propane heater, but it did become a little aggravating at times. So one of the problems I had was running out of propane at a bad time. So sometimes it's hard to tell just how much propane was left in one of those tanks and how long that was going to last depending on the setting I had on that heater, whether I was running on high, medium, or low. So if it was a really cold night and I knew I had to run it on high all night, I basically had to start with a fresh, new, completely full tank of propane. Otherwise it could run out in the middle of the night and then I could be in serious trouble. I didn't want to stay up all night keeping an eye on that thing. So I always had to keep a full tank of propane if it was really cold, and I had several different tanks that I would shuffle through, but I wasn't always able to use all the propane in a given tank there because I knew when I hooked it up I had to have enough to make it through the night. Another issue with that system is that propane did become a little expensive some years when we experienced more colder nights than normal. Running propane all the time, continuously filling those tanks could get a little pricey. And then the third issue with that system was when we would go out of town, for instance going camping around the holidays or something like that, getting somebody to come over here and monitor the heat in that little greenhouse, a little tricky. You know, I can get somebody to come water the plants, that's pretty easy, but getting somebody to come and hook up another propane tank, make sure they're full, all that, a little tough to ask somebody that's not used to maintaining a greenhouse. So that was one of the things I wanted to kind of get away from, more of the manual stuff, and have more automated systems with this new greenhouse here, so I didn't have to tell somebody to come by here every day and roll up the sides in the morning and then roll them back down at night. We wanted more automation there where it could maintain a decent temperature there without having to fool with it quite as much. So if you've been following along, you know that this new 30x40 greenhouse has been built for several months now, but like I told you earlier, we just got power hooked up to this thing yesterday. So every kind of general electrician I called was way too backed up, or they didn't want to fool with this. Finally got in touch with an electrician that does greenhouses specifically, knows how to hook these things up, has done hundreds of them. Got him out here, and then Hurricane Helene came, and where he lives it was just catastrophic damage, so he was tied up with all that for a month or two. Finally got him out here yesterday to finish up right in time because we're supposed to get some temps in the 30s this weekend. So I'll kind of walk you through what they did yesterday and then show you some of the bells and whistles inside that new greenhouse now that we have power. So we've always had power out here at the barn, but we had to run that power out to the new greenhouse and had to run a decent amount of it. So you can see this new pipe that's been installed here. This is for 100 amp wire that we have running all the way out there to the new greenhouse. So when the electrician initially came out here, he said, we're gonna have to run that wire alongside your barn there, because he said his trencher wouldn't be able to dig a deep enough trench in this hard, compacted clay soil here under the barn. But where there's a will, there's a way. You can see we don't have it running the length of the barn. Our cable and our new water line is indeed ran underground all the way out there to the new greenhouse. Now we knew trenching out here in the grass wasn't going to be an issue, but we knew it was definitely going to be an issue here underneath the barn where our camper had been parked and it had just been compacted for decades. So I put my thinking cap on, and after he came by the first time, what I did was I ran me a line of drip tape from one end of the barn to the other end, and I let it run for about 2 days and got it really soaked right there. Then I took my wheel hoe with the plow set and made me a little shallow trench to kind of get started. Run that drip tape a little bit longer, took my trenching shovel and trenched it out a little bit, not a lot, probably only about, I don't know, 4 or 5 inches, enough to where it would hold water well. So trenched it out a little bit with the shovel, and then I just kept soaking that little trench every 3 or 4 days, soaking it really well. And by the time he got out here yesterday, the trencher dug a 2-foot trench just fine in there, worked like a charm. Now had I not wet it down and dug out that little trench, probably wouldn't have worked, but I'm glad it did. So everything is a lot neater now, considering this is buried and not ran alongside the barn there. They also put me in a camper plug right here so we could hook up our camper out here, run the AC if we need to. So until yesterday, we had just been managing the temp in this larger greenhouse with the roll-up sides here. So on days where it was staying relatively warm around here, I would roll it all the way up to that bar right there. On days where it was a little bit cooler, I'd only roll it up about that much, and then I'd come out here right before dark and roll it all the way down. But now we don't have to do that as much because we've got power inside there. We've got all our fans working now, and I'll show you those in just a minute. Just to kind of give you an idea of the temperature range I'm trying to maintain in there. I don't want it getting colder than 40 degrees, and I really don't want it getting hotter than 80 degrees. I'm not necessarily trying to maintain a single constant temperature. Yes, you can get greenhouses that do that. They're a lot more expensive than what we have here. So I'm just looking to keep things in that 40 to 80 range. So inside here you can see our panel box there, and then we have our thermostat here that controls our vent and our big fan. So the way this works is you set it on a certain temperature that you don't want it getting hotter than in here, and when it gets to that temperature, this vent here will first open up, and then that fan over there on the other end will start pulling air through that vent out the other side of the greenhouse. So I had everything turned off, but I'll turn it back on so you can see how it works. Let me flip the switch, and then the vent will automatically open there based on the thermostat. And now you can see our fan is powering up, pulling the air through here. And in just 1 day of using that auto vent and fan system, I can already tell that's going to be a big game changer, because unlike my little greenhouse where I'd have to come out here and roll up the sides, even on these fall days where it's getting up to, you know, say high 70s during the day, with this bigger greenhouse I can leave it rolled down all day long, and I know that vent and that fan is going to kick on when I got that thermostat set at say 75, 78 degrees, and it's actually keeping it nice and cool in there. So we don't have to fool with rolling the sides up and down every day. We can let the vent and fan do their thing. So during the day, or when the temperature reaches that threshold that we've set on the thermostat there, the vent's gonna open, that big fan is gonna run and keep it nice and cool. And then right at dark or at night, when that big fan stops running, when it starts to cool down a little bit, these fans right here, these HAF fans, automatically come on, keep the air nice and circulated in here. So we've got one right there and then one over there. They're blowing in opposite directions. And those fans may not look very big, but man, those things will blow some air. And those two HAF fans are going to be especially helpful on nights when we have to run this heater here. So this is the heater I decided to go with. Plugs in right there, 50 amp plug in. This is a 10,000 watt salamander heater. Probably a little overkill for most winters down here in South Georgia, but every 5 or 7 years we'll get some temperatures in the low 20s or in the teens, and I wanted to be prepared for that, so I went ahead and got enough heater for those situations. And I went with this one here because I can easily roll it around and move it. I can get it out of here in the spring when I don't need it anymore, or I can move it around the greenhouse just depending on where I've got my plants. Now it does have a setting on here. You can crank this thing up pretty high. I played around with it a little bit last night, but I'm not going to be able to really see what it will do until it gets down to 39 later this week. Gonna have to figure out there along that dial kind of the best setting I need to put it at to keep it from getting below 40 degrees in here. And once I figure out what setting this thing needs to be on, the electrician is actually going to put me another thermostat right here, another auto control for our heater. So say for instance, when it gets down to 45 or 50 degrees in here, this thing will just automatically turn on for me. So hopefully in the next week or so, once we have the cooling system and the heater all automated, we'll be in business. There won't be a lot of manual adjustments that need to be made. There won't be a lot of sleep lost over worrying about this thing not being warm enough or getting too hot. We'll have it all set, so it will just take care of it for us. And before we go, just a quick update on our fig tree propagation efforts. You can see we've got these 2 rows of racks almost completely full, which means we're almost finished. We've got some really good looking growth right here and over there. Some varieties just propagate and pop faster than others. And we've got some like this Canadria flat that we started about a week ago. They're just starting to bud out. So I've got enough racks here to do one more row, just like those other 2 rows. We'll do one more double row of racks, put the rest of our fig trees, those last few varieties we need to propagate, and then I'm going to do quite a few mulberry trees as well. And then we'll save the rest of this floor space for stepped up fig trees in those 4x9 pots we use for shipping. And once I get a better idea of how all that's going to lay out, I can start thinking about an automated watering system in here. So as I told you earlier, they went ahead and ran a water line for me, and we just got it stubbed up right there. Still got to figure out how I want to do this in here, but I'm ready whenever that time comes. So it was a long, nervous couple months waiting to get power hooked up in this thing, but now that we have it, I feel so much better, and I feel like we're going to be able to grow out our fig trees even better now because we can more easily keep that temperature range that we want. You don't have to come out here and manually adjust things as much. So I hope you enjoyed the video today, and we'll be sure to keep you all updated as we add more racks in that greenhouse, as we transition those fig trees from 2.5-inch pots to 4x9 pots. And if you missed the first video when we had just gotten this thing built and talked about some of the different features and why we went with this particular model, you can watch that right here and see some of the nuts and bolts of the greenhouse itself. So check that out, and we'll see you next time right here at Lazy Dog Farm.